So Trent, take us back before real estate. Who was Trent before real estate? What were you doing? Kind of give us a peek behind the curtain.
Sure. So Trent before real estate was not exactly sure what he wanted to do. I spent my college years getting an electrical engineering degree. I've never used it in my life. I went from that straight into investment banking, where I worked on both a CLO platform. So if you've seen The Big Short, I did something very similar to what they were doing. And then went into merger and acquisition work here at a regional investment bank. Did that till about 2011 before I found my way backwards into real estate, or as someone has said, failed my way into real estate.
So did you go to school then for investment banking? And you said you didn't know what you wanted to do, but I mean, why did you get into investment banking then?
So good question. I did not go to school for investment banking. I've been consistently pursuing things that I know nothing about throughout my career. And so going into school, coming out of high school, I was told, hey, you're good at math and science, you should explore an engineering degree. So I did that. And in doing so, found that there was not quite enough excitement in the engineering space that I had wanted in my career. I wanted a faster track. And around my junior year, a lot of my friends were applying to investment banks and consulting firms and things that I had never really heard of. But just like so many things, figuring out how to interview for those jobs is systematic, right? So I went and found the books and found the questions and studied, and I just interviewed for every job I could possibly find in the investment banking space. So somewhere around, interview number 25, somebody finally made the mistake of hiring me.
I mean, so that's pretty amazing. So electrical engineering, and then you're just like, you know what? I'm just going to figure out how to study so that I can really just cheat code my way through the interview process. 25 interviews. I mean, that's a lot. Yep. And then you get into investment banking around, and I mean, you brought it up, one of my favorite movies, The Big Short. You get into investment banking around that time period. So, share with me, was it right before the crash? Was it as the crash was happening? What year was that?
So yes, to both of those. So 2005, I graduated from college and started at what was in Wachovia, is now Wells Fargo here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was initially on the CLO platform, and we did commercial credit for middle market companies. The Big Short, they're doing mortgages, and we all know the story of what happened to mortgages. What is less told is the same exact thing happened on the corporate credit side. These small and mid-market companies were over-levering themselves, and we were packaging the assets into a vehicle and selling out tranches to other investors, with the understanding that, similar to mortgages, there was only a certain amount that would default, and therefore certain tranches were safe and all of that. All the same stuff happened, and it all came crashing down in that 2008, 2009 timeframe. By then, I had, to some degree, seen the writing on the wall and taken a job with a regional middle market M&A shop. So I went from the highly structured debt product to selling companies, which is more interesting and began to lead me on this path to where I am today.
Interesting. Well, you and I are going to have to make a movie on the less told story of corporate credit, The Big Short credit or something.
We'll call it the Little Short.
The Little Short. There we go. I like it. So, all right, at this point then you get into selling businesses, and how then did you kind of find real estate? Were you selling businesses that had real estate attached? Tell me about that progression.
So when 2009 happened, everything began to fall apart. My colleagues and I, being young in our 20s with enough money to be dangerous, had all bought homes and condos. I was not in real estate. I didn't know anything about it, but we had all bought property thinking, as so many did at the time, home values will continue to rise, and they were rising rapidly, 05, 06. When we all began to lose our jobs or get rehomed or go back to school, we had these assets that we no longer were able to sell without ending up underwater. And so I put my hand up for a lot of those folks and said, let me actually look after the property. I'll help you find a tenant. I'll check in on them. I'll collect the rent. I'll pay you the difference, and I'll take a margin. I had no idea at the time that what I was doing was property management. I hadn't even bothered to look to see if that was a thing people did. I was just doing a favor, and word kind of got around within the bank and within the financial circles, which is a big part of what happens here in Charlotte. And I ended up managing 20, 25 properties, and someone said, you probably have some liability here. You should probably set up an entity. And I said, yeah, it's not a bad idea. So I went through that process. And in doing so, they said, you can't do this without a real estate license, right? And I said, I did not know that. I should go get a real estate license. So sat in real estate school with my hat pulled low, hiding, so no one would catch on to the fact that I had already been operating as a real estate professional for about a year at that time. So that was how I ended up in real estate. Now, as I went into the merger and acquisition world, what I realized in doing that was I was at this table as a junior associate with other highly pedigreed folks from, that went to the top schools across the country. And we were all in suits trying to help this person who may or may not have even graduated from high school sell their business for 50, 80, $100 million. And he was in a shirt and jeans, and we were all in power suits. And I said, the person walking away from this table with the most money is the one who started a company. And they did it without a bunch of fancy degrees and a bunch of all the other stuff. They just had a desire to succeed, and they built it. They took a chance. They started doing something. And then really all that they had done was they said, well, I've got customers. If I can teach somebody to do what I do and I can make a margin on that, then I can just scale it. And so whether I worked in anything from restaurants and retail to healthcare to industrial services, and somebody who at age 15 bought a power washer ended up being a $80 million industrial cleaning company by the time he was 35, 40. And so those stories really stuck with me. And I said, whenever the time comes, I want to be in that seat. I don't want to be here taking a small fee. I want to be the one in the seat making the big bucks. And so that was one of the aha moments from that time in my career.
I mean, that aha moment is so powerful. And I think you just put words probably to what a lot of my listeners, feel, but don't necessarily know how to state it. And it was so powerful. I mean, I wrote it down. The person walking away from that table with the most money was the person who took a risk to start something. And that's what the journey we're in. Entrepreneurship is about risk taking and your relationship with risk and fear. It makes me think of a book that's a lot of people have been reading lately, The Psychology of Money. And in that, he talks about risk and luck and our relationship with that. And so you take this risk and you decide to start a business, and it's going to be in the real estate space. I mean, why real estate when you're around these other businesses that, a boring industrial cleaning company that you're selling for $80 million? Why was it real estate?
Yeah, so great question. But that same instance where I had started that property management business, I wasn't able to be in investment banking and operate that business. So I had partnered with someone who was operating it. And 2012 came along, and Charlotte, North Carolina was hosting the Democratic National Convention. And this was before the days of Airbnb. So we began to focus on these, what we called hyper short-term rentals, 1 week, 4 days, whatever it might be. And we were able to charge because Charlotte didn't have enough hotel space inside the security circle. So it was very hard to get in and out of Charlotte for all these events and everything. So we began to rent condos and homes that were inside that circle for what at the time were very large amounts, $3,000, $4,000 for a week for a 2-bedroom condo. And so what we told our clients was, look, hand over the keys to us. You go take a vacation for a week. You're going to come back. We'll put money back in your pocket. You'll make money taking vacation. You don't have to worry about it. We'll handle the rest. We took a 25% margin, which is about what people charge now for managing Airbnb as a service. And we also began to sell to the people who are staying concierge service. So, breakfast in the morning and change your towels and turn down service and all this stuff that we tried to make a hotel-like experience. I can tell some stories about that in a bit, but there were. I'll get to that in a second.
All right.
Long story short, we had a great experience with that, and we were selling things that we never thought we'd sell before. So initially we were like, we'll take the photos for free. We'll put you on this website, and we're getting all this traffic. By the end, we were charging $499 just to be on our website, and charging another $100 for us to come take professional photos. So we're making money even if these places didn't get rented. And my eyes were open to the powers of digital marketing, what could happen with that kind of platform when everyone is coming to you. And it wasn't that I was trying to be overly capitalistic. I simply couldn't handle the volume of inquiries that we were getting, because we were the premier DNC rental platform. And people said, list my property. And I would say, I know nobody's going to rent it. You're 30 minutes outside the security circle. Nobody's going to care. But I will put it on the website. I'm just not going to do it for free because I know it's a waste of time. And so I began learning what I could charge for, what people valued, and things like that. So I played that game, and we did very well. And because of the amount of business that we did for the DNC and the amount of press that we got in doing all that, the long-term property management business about quadrupled in size within the span of about 12 months. And so that was the place in 2013 that I found myself. And I said, by this point, I had left all notions of a real job and was just doing this. And I said, okay, I've either got to double down and run hard at property management, or I need to take this opportunity to exit. And I was able to create an exit with my business partner at the time, hand over the keys to him, put some cash in my pocket, and then figure out what was next. And what was next was brokerage. But I'll go back for a second, because I promised I would.
Yeah,
to
please
the story. There were some foreign entities who were staying in some of our places that had higher security clearances. And we had sold them this concierge turn down service, breakfast kind of thing, which we were just going to take a margin and hire somebody to cater and clean up and do all that stuff. When I met with them to welcome them and put them in I think they rented like 10 condos in the same building. I said, the person will be by in the morning to do the turn down, take out the trash and bring breakfast. And they said, oh no, that's not going to work. You are the only one that is allowed to come in these rooms. We are not going to have anyone else. So at 5 a.m. for the whole week of the DNC, I was basically in hotel rooms, in condos, making beds, taking out trash, bringing breakfast, washing dishes, doing all that. So
that's incredible.
My DNC experience was not all that glamorous, to be honest.
Wow.
So, although we did get invited to some cool parties and events and stuff, and of course we would stay out till 11 or midnight, and then I had to be up at 5 and cleaning toilets,
cleaning these hotel rooms. I mean, you're the maid, you were the newspaper boy, the baker. Like, okay,
I did it all. So we did not expect that. That caught us off guard, but it was fun. And
Trent, before we get into the brokerage and that transition, like, I mean, what were some of the biggest lessons that you learned about property management? Because that's a big thing. A lot of people that listen to this podcast are in the management space. And what were some of the things that you learned, maybe specifically about short-term rental management, that would be valuable for people to?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the long-term stuff. The biggest thing that I learned was that is a very tough business. It's low margin and it requires a high volume of assets under management for it to really make sense. And you're always chasing your tail a little bit because it's so time intensive. You're always dealing with problems. By the time you have enough enough people to cover your existing inventory. You're adding inventory, you have to hire another person. So it's very difficult to scale it. It's also geographically hard to scale to cover that kind of distance and actually truly manage property. And no one ever calls you because they're happy, right?
Exactly.
Something wrong with the property, or where's the rent that I'm supposed to get this month? No one's calling you and just saying.
No one calls Trent and says, "Hey, my toilet flushed today. Thank you."
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah, no one calls me on Thanksgiving to wish me a happy Thanksgiving. They call me because the water heater broke, and so that it wasn't a ton of fun. It wasn't super sexy. The margins were very thin, and scaling, even though we had quadrupled the business, finding that next step function of growth was hard to envision. And so that was my lesson was, it's going to take too long. It's going to be too hard to grow organically. I want to move faster. And so that wasn't for me. As far as short-term rentals go, what I learned was at the time, especially without an Airbnb or VRBO platform, they are very difficult to manage. And the fact that there are companies out there that take 20 and 25%, which seems very expensive, I get it. I mean, that's what we were taking, and we only did it for a week, and it was still a heavy lift to try to get all that done. Of course, layer in the fact that I was cooking breakfast and cleaning hotel rooms and making beds, but aside from that, it's just a really tough business. And now the margins are great. You can charge a lot more for that experience. And myself, I have some of my own Airbnb property now that is going much better because now we have a systematic way to do it. We have Airbnb, we have all the data, all the stuff. So that opportunity that was very small and only existed around the DNC is now available to everyone, and we compete directly with hotels and things like that. It's become very interesting. I actually have considered, I have no research to support this whatsoever, but one of the things that I'm curious about is how many short-term rentals are a portion of the inventory that is not coming back online anymore, that people buy and they say, well, rather than make 6 or 7% renting traditionally, I'm making a 15% margin on an Airbnb or more. Why would I ever sell it? Assets are increasing in price. And so you have this permanent inventory loss because people can do that now.
Well, and I think if I were to share some of my thoughts on that, I would agree, depending on the market, that there is more and more of that as kind of this information about short-term rental is increasingly democratized, and it's easy for my 12-year-old to, stumble onto a news article now that says like make big gains in Airbnb. Well, I'm 18. I want to buy an Airbnb. I'm not going to sell it. So I think what you're saying is correct. And I can only see it getting, more and more prevalent. And I think that's why in certain markets, I came from a different market before Arizona, where, the municipalities were increasingly bearing down on Airbnb and VRBO, right? So it will be interesting to see kind of the next 5 to 10 years where this goes, what this looks like in cities like New York City and Charlotte and other growing metropolises. Just one more thing on the short-term rental then. I think one of the biggest questions that Airbnb owners or would-be owners have is, where do I find a manager? Is there any type of resource or software, that you know of that you would say, hey, this is a tool if you're going into this space owning Airbnbs, you need to be aware of this resource?
Sure. So AirDNA is one that is probably pretty well known. As far as a manager, we actually have a relationship with a company called Rabbu, RABBU. I do not know how far west they cover yet, but I do know they cover much of the East Coast, and they are a turnkey operation. So you can go onto their website, you can get estimates for what your Airbnb will go for. They also have projections for listed properties, so you can go find investment opportunities through their website, and they charge about 25% to manage the property, and they will tell you at least in Charlotte, if you're looking to do Airbnb, the 1 and 2 bedrooms are not the way to go. Yes, they're the cheapest to acquire, but they're not what's really in demand. What's in demand is the 3+ bedroom single family home. That's the experience that people are looking for when they come to Charlotte or another city. They want to bring their family. They want to be in a home. They want to be in a neighborhood. They don't want the equivalent of a hotel room, and they want to be able to sleep 4, 5, 6 people for $350 a night or $400 a night, rather than spending, $200 a night per room or $300 a night per room for 2 to 3 couples or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I really appreciate it. So let's get into then the transition into actual brokerage. And I mean, just so everyone's going to be aware very quickly, but I mean, you run an incredibly massive team, and I've interviewed some of the top, real estate professionals in the game today, and your business, your operation may be one of the biggest that I've ever had the pleasure of, speaking with about. So I really want to bring our listeners into that. So take us through the journey a little bit about the brokerage side, and let's talk about how you did scale this business so massive.
Sure. So 2013, there I was exiting property management with a real estate license finally that, as I was supposed to
You're
have.
totally legal now.
Totally legal, ready to roll. And I will not take us down this rabbit hole, but I was at the time doing locally some stand-up comedy, which is a whole other thing.
I love it. You're coming to my brokerage sometime and giving us a routine.
It was, it was an experience for about 2 years, a ton of fun, something I'd always wanted to do. I was really bad at it for like the first 6 or 7 months and like bombed just night after night, and it was awful. And then when you are just about to kind of give up all hope, you become good because you're just conversational and people laugh at people who have no hope. So,
that's a great way of putting it. I love it.
I mean, there's very few comics that get up there and say, "Hey, my life's going great," right? You need a little bit of that, the truthiness that makes things actually funny, truth and exaggeration. All that to say, I met a person who was a friend of another comic, and she had just gotten her real estate license, and she said, "Hey, I just joined this firm. Why don't you hang your license here and sling some houses with me?" And I said, sure, because I don't know really what else I'm going to do. And the margins look a lot better than property management, and it looks a lot more fun and interesting, especially if it's anything like what I see on HGTV. And as we all know, of course it is, right?
Classic.
And so I started there. And I also didn't really know what my next step was. So I signed up for a local professional executive MBA program here in Charlotte through Wake Forest. And I was like, I tell you what, I'll do this for 2 years. I'll sell some houses, but I'm going to get an MBA and I'm going to get a real job again. That's what makes sense. That's the right thing to do. And I began doing that. And it turns out I was able to sell enough homes to my classmates in the MBA program that I paid for the full MBA program. And I said,
wow.
I was like, that's cool. And then all of these folks who are going on to get real jobs are probably going to want to trade up into better homes. So I'll just hold on to this license, keep doing this. By the time we got to 2015, I had gone, so the first 6 months, didn't sell a single home, right? It was, just not, I didn't know how to begin. I sold one to a friend of ours. And then the second home I sold was to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. We lived in that house for several years. I didn't know how to find business. It was at a very small firm. I didn't have the tools of Keller Williams. I didn't know we didn't have a bunch of listings to go do open houses. And so I started looking for ways to drive business to me. The same thing I had done for property management, right? I went, how do people come to me, clicking to me to go buy a home? I don't know how to sell. I just want to talk to people who actually want to talk to me, and then we can go look at homes. So I did a bunch of different things, and the thing that worked best for me was Zillow. Zillow and Trulia at the time were separate companies. So I started buying some leads on Zillow. I spent a couple $100 a month, and it took about 7 or 8 months before I sold my first one, but the first commission that I got from it after splits and everything was like $3,000. And I was like, well, that paid for the whole 7 months. Plus I picked up some people in my pipeline. So if I doubled down on this, I could get more people in my pipeline, plus more should close. I'll get these transactions happening faster. I didn't do a lot of fancy math around that. I just kind of said, this seems to make sense and I think this works and it's directionally correct. I'll figure out the details later. And so what I did for the next 2 years was just take the profits that I had after making ends meet and doubled down over and over again, added zeros to that number. So it went from $100 a month to $1,000 a month to $10,000 a month, and continued to add that. I was also tutoring at the time in math and science because engineering degree, right? Didn't really use it. So I had some extra money that I could like take some chances with between that and the sale of my property management business. So I was experimenting, tried every lead system that was out there, every CRM. Zillow worked best for me. Realtor.com a little bit, Zillow worked best. And I got to that place where I was spending 10, 15 grand a month. And I realized I can't handle all this lead volume. I need support. And I had gone back to the person who was running the brokerage and said, I need a team member. I need to figure something out here. And at the time, she didn't have a structure for that within the brokerage. We all ended up moving to Keller Williams in April 2015 because the young lady who is now my KW sponsor said, you should really come look at what we do. We have all that. Like we have teams, we have the tools, we have the technology, we can do all that stuff. And so in doing that, once I got to KW, I said, well, I don't need to be a part of this person's team anymore. I have all the tools at Keller Williams. And so I went out and found the shortest path to finding a person and put an ad on Craigslist and had a bunch of people respond, some not so great, but had one gentleman respond. He had experience selling cars. He had experience in the military. I was like, this is my guy. He said he'd been with KW for 12 months and never sold a home. So I said, let me plug you into my system. I think I can get you up and running. And that's what we did. And we worked out of my living room for the first several months because we didn't have an office because I wasn't going to spend money on space when I could buy more leads. And as we kind of scaled, and I told him, I was like, look, you're just going to follow me around for a while. It'll probably take us a year to get up and running, but I just can't handle the lead volume. Maybe one day you can take the leads yourself, but I just kind of need like a pseudo assistant kind of thing. And he said, oh, great, I'm in. Like, I'm going to share commissions with you, but you're not going to have your own business. I think that lasted about 3 weeks before I was like, dude, you just got to figure this out. I'm going to funnel leads to you. You're just off to the races. And by the way, we're hiring 2 more people that are going to be buyer's agents, and we're just going to do this. So I did it all wrong. I didn't hire the admin first. I hired buyer's agents. One of the reasons, you and I probably haven't talked before is I stayed pretty under the radar because I was doing it all the wrong ways. I was not in the model. I was not doing it the way Gary would have liked. And I was, but I needed to figure it out. I needed to bang my head against the wall a few times. So that became the system. So bringing Keith on board and then buying leads and continuing to say, okay, I can afford this many more people. And I think this is about the margin. And we scaled from there. Anyone who tells you they ever built a business in straight lines, lying to you. So that's the simple version. I had the model all wrong. I was on the wrong splits. We nearly ran out of money. When I came out of production, the whole thing nearly fell apart because all the profit was in my production, my business. And I was basically breaking even to losing money on everybody on the team. But I knew if I wanted to be that person at the table, walking away with a big check one day, I couldn't be in the business. I had to be working on the business. So I stayed out of production, went into debt until I figured it out, just trying to break it over and over again. We had to tweak splits eventually, basically turned over the whole team back in 2017, 2018. Went through some pretty wild and embarrassing moments at times when, at the time I was spending probably 70, 80 grand a month on Zillow. And we got to a point where I was like, I can't pay it, right? We've depleted funds. We borrowed all the money we can borrow. And Zillow said, if you can't pay, we're cutting you off. And they did. And within a day, I'm getting blown up by everybody in town. They're saying, Zillow's calling me saying, you can't pay your bills. I'm like, oh, great. So their whole sales staff is coming after all my competitors. So I was like, I got to figure this out quick. And we, begged, borrowed, and stole to make it work and get caught up, and had to rebuild. So we rebuilt from there. That was probably the time when it was the closest to, the whole thing falling apart and looking at a mountain of debt that I was like, man, I thought this model was going to work. And here we are 3 years later, and it's just gone deeper into the red. So we got to change everything. And so we did. We got back on track. We used the system EOS in the book Traction. Rocket Fuel is another one that talks about the visionary integrator relationship. That book and that process was dramatically changed our direction. So 2018, we turned the corner. And by October 2018, Zillow was looking for a partner in Charlotte for their Zillow Offers program. And at that time, 2017, we'd done about 100 million. 2018, we managed to stay flat despite all the craziness. And on October 26th of 2018, I was getting in an Uber to go to the airport to fly to Vegas for a Zillow conference. And I got a call from Zillow, and they said, we'd like to congratulate you. You are going to be the exclusive recipient of the Zillow Offers relationship in Charlotte. Here's what this means. You're going to be doing this many transactions a month. We're going to be pushing all this stuff. By the way, we know you have about 25 total people on your team. You're probably going to need to double or triple that within a couple months. We're going to launch on December 12th. We're going to do a drive run the week before Thanksgiving. Make sure everything's up and running by then. And so I was like, this is great news. You probably should have waited until after Las Vegas to tell me this, because I don't need to be celebrating to that degree in a place like Las Vegas. Nonetheless, we landed, me and my team, and the next morning, with our head in our hands from the hangovers and headaches, we said, okay, how do we do this? And so we scaled up and we pulled it off with the help of
Trent. I'm gonna stop you just for a second, because this is a huge inflection point in your career, and I just want to just touch on something that you brought up. You said you weren't doing everything according to the model, but you had to bang your head against the wall, and that just is something that's a lesson that I think everyone needs to realize that. Yes, I am a big believer in coaching and consulting business people to models that work. And there's sometimes where, as a coach or a consultant, just a business person, you gotta figure it out. You've got to be left in that pain too of just messing up and failing and being okay. I think there's a key inflection point in my life where my father brought me to an ATM and he let me take $1,000 out of my account. And all he said to me was, David, you're spending everything that's in your savings account. I think I was maybe 13 years old. You're spending everything in your savings account. Do you think this is a wise decision? And I think a lot of parents, for instance, would have said, like, no, you're not doing that. And yet my dad used that as this opportunity to let me make the mistake and bang my head against the wall so that I could learn something about finance, about money. And I just bring that up as an example and an analogy because I have never forgotten that moment. I can bring you back to that exact ATM where a week later, when I had nothing as a young teenager, but I wanted to do something or buy something, I learned something key about money, that saving and investing actually was super important. And what you're talking about, Trent, I think is exactly the same thing. Like sometimes the greatest lessons in life come from the failure, the banging our head against the wall. And then that allows us to grow and evolve and get to who we were meant to be, what our business was meant to be. I mean, and I just wanted listeners to pick up on that, because I think your life, your business is key example of that.
Yeah, and you look at, I think I fell victim to this too, coming out of college and starting my career, and it seems like everyone knows how to do the things, right? Oh, you go do the things and you get a job and you save your money and you put in money in a 401k and you do all this stuff, and people are adept at their job and they stay in a very narrow lane. And I was never great at that. I was in investment banking for 6 years, but I was not a great investment banker. I waited till the last minute. We worked 80, 90 hours a week, but other people were working the whole time. I was like exploring, looking at real estate stuff and looking at stock market stuff and just not doing my job until I absolutely had to. And I just didn't get why, how, and I always thought there's got to be a better way to do this than the way we're being taught. And if you look at everyone who's ever started a business or become an artist or done anything, played a sport, there's a way to hit a baseball. There's a way to paint a picture of something that you see. There's a way to follow a model, the Keller Williams model, right? The MREA model. All of those things are there, and you can get reasonably far doing the things exactly right. But when you look at the people who are great, there's always something unique about what they do, and they didn't do it by staying in the model, right? They did it by operating in the margins outside that model. And I can guarantee you the first few times they tried it, it didn't work very well, right? The first time, somebody tries to throw first time Dennis Eckersley threw the ball sidearm, that ball did not move the way he wanted and not go into the strike zone like that. There's things that happen that we find ways forward. And if you're not experimenting a little bit and taking some risks, you're probably not going to figure out which of those ways is going to work. And it's that little bit of alpha that is really where the leverage is, where the excitement happens. Because once you find out, when I started buying leads on Zillow in 2013, 2014, it was unheard of. It was like, oh, no one does that. I could call my Zillow rep and I'd say, here, this zip code, how much can I buy? He'd say the whole thing. No one's buying it. Say, I want it all. Give it all to me. Because I also believe that at the time, if I owned all of those zip codes, if anyone else wanted to compete with me, they wouldn't be able to, because I owned 100%. So I could actually block my competition from competing in that way. And so I could create a defensive economic moat around my business model. But that little idea of, consumers go to Zillow, I don't know how to sell, why don't I just buy leads through them? It entirely catapulted my business. Now, granted, I had to lean into it and spend money and nearly go broke and do all the stuff. But had I never taken that chance, I probably never would have figured that out. And everything that people do every single day, if you got it right the first time, every time, we'd all be done. We'd all retire within a year because we do 5 things and we get them exactly right, and we make tons of money, and then we'd say, all right, I'm good, But
exactly.
that doesn't happen. It takes a lifetime in careers, and most of the time you're getting it wrong.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think, every founder of successful company can probably tell that story about when they were just about at rock bottom, just about out of money. And questioning everything that they'd done up to that point. So bring us back to that key inflection point. You're back from Vegas. You are faced with this daunting task of doubling your workforce within just, if I'm getting my calculations right, just maybe 2 months, 2 to 3 months.
Yep. Not even, about 45 days.
45 days. What does that look like to scale that quickly, and how did you guys go about it?
Sure. So we had the benefit of being the 4th market that Zillow was launching. So Phoenix had happened first, Atlanta had happened first, and so Zillow was great to us in bringing us out to meet with the broker partners in Phoenix and the Sanders team down in Atlanta and saying, here's how they've designed it. Now, we don't know if this is the right model, but this is what, again, operating in that gray area of this probably works best. Here's how they did it. So we borrowed some ideas there. Here's how Sanders did it. We borrowed ideas there. And then Trent, go do it your way. And I said, well, do I have to do it exactly like this? And they said, no, because we don't even know if this is how this should be. We just know we need people who can move fast and are willing to take chances and figure it out. So we did, and we posted jobs for W-2s. We took the approach primarily of hiring 1099s to do certain things, and we hired in what I would call, you've heard of just-in-time inventory. This was just-in-time hiring. So Zillow goes through a process of pricing the home, then pitching to the seller of the home that they're going to acquire, then fixing up the home, and then relisting the home. So we said, well, we don't need the people who are relisting the home yet. We need the pricing team. So let's find the pricing team. Let's offer 1099s to people. If, depending on the volume we see, we'll flip them into W-2s. Then, as those get ramped up, we'll hire our acquisition team and we'll 1099 them for transaction coordination, whatever we need to, until we figure out who works best, and then we'll flip them into W-2s. Then we'll do the same. Zillow handled all the repair and upfitting and everything for the homes that they put back on the market. But then last, we would hire the resale team. And so we did the things in order to give ourselves the best opportunity to preserve capital while scaling into this business. So we were scaled up in 45 days, but we went from 25 people to 75 people in 6 months. And the first 10, 15 hires happened in those first 45 days.
Oh, wow.
The next series of hires happened in the next 60 days,
okay.
Right? In the next group. So it didn't all happen like that. And then we also had the benefit of now everybody in town knew that we were, once they announced publicly that we were the partner, we had real estate agents reaching out to us and saying, hey, we don't know what this is going to look like. We know it's going to be big. We'd like to be a part of it. So our hiring for traditional agents became a lot easier as well. That was that kind of like similar to the property management thing. The press that we got from it made us very attractive to your 1099 real estate agent.
There's almost this like consistent theme in your life of like inbound, like I want to figure out how to make this inbound, like inbound marketing, inbound management, inbound hiring, inbound, resale agents finding us. And I think that also requires having, a business that is very attractive and a value proposition that's attractive. So you scale up, and I want to kind of go down a couple different paths here. First off, I want to ask you the question about what you've learned as a leader of a massive organization. I mean, I think when, most $100 million producers hear that you have 25 W-2s, that's, that in of itself is pretty unheard of in real estate, I think, across the vast majority of the industry. What have you learned about that, about keeping talent, the red tape around having that many employees? What would you share with a real estate agent who's like, man, I have 2 W-2s and I might double that this year into 4?
Yeah. So a couple things. Number one, at some point, stop looking at your payroll statement. Because it is daunting. And the other one is, if you're building something special that you believe in, if you're carrying the torch of your team's culture and whatever you intend for it to be, if you can lay out a vision for people that they can get behind, they will tolerate some mistakes, right? I've learned to be very transparent. I didn't always share financial stuff with my team. And then once we got to that place where things were falling apart, and I wrote up on the board all the like places we owed money and our monthly expenses and all the stuff, and people said, well, I had no idea, right? It was borderline emotional for me, because I was like, I tried to protect y'all from this because I wanted you to just see the happy, shiny stuff and go sell houses. And I carried the burden in on my shoulders to figure out the model that worked. How can I let you be an agent? How can I let you be a person and operate in an autonomous way without having to micromanage and do all the stuff? And I didn't get it right. And so from then on, I became very transparent in everything. We go over our quarterly financials with the entire team, balance sheet, income statement, cash flow, what we're spending on leads every quarter, and with the entire team, every W-2, every agent. That became a big part of it, and so we haven't gotten it right every time. And so the W-2s on our team, that when we were scaling up, we weren't able to pay as much as we would have liked, or we weren't able to bonus every quarter because things didn't go well. They believed in a bigger vision, and they stuck with us, and they hung around. And now we're at a place where we can pay people what they want. We have a great benefits program. We've got 401k matches, and we cover healthcare costs, and we have maternity and paternity leave, and we do all those things for our people that we never could have done in the early days. So I would say to the person who's going from 2 to 4, don't drive yourself crazy trying to get it exactly right, because it's not going to be right, and it's going to change. And you don't need an HR department out of the gate. Find a little one-off advisor, and if you're using Paychex, that's fine, or QuickBooks, or whatever is out there that's providing your payroll service. Just do the best you can, but do it. But like sitting there and planning and thinking about all the things that can go wrong, man, if I had done that, I'd be back in investment banking probably.
Definitely. Well, Trent, at the time of this recording, obviously Zillow has been in the news. There are very polarizing thoughts on them shutting down the iBuyer sector, laying off, reportedly 25% of their workforce. And there's a lot of opinions. And you just brought up transparency. And I just wanted to ask you, transparently, with your partnership, as you look into the future, what is your take? I mean, what's the effect of this on you and your organization? And how does this change the industry moving forward? I mean, I know I just packed a lot, but I'm curious to hear from you and your perspective.
Yeah, no, happy to share. So Zillow throughout this has been a fantastic partner to us. There are times when we've known that they're making a change that was coming. We were not aware of this most recent change, but we had been told that they were taking things in-house back before it became public that they were taking the brokerage part of it back in-house. We had time to plan and organize our teams accordingly, and it went, all things considered, for big changes that happened quickly, went pretty well. I don't know how much they knew internally about what they were going to do, but it gave us as partners a much softer landing than it would have had this most recent news broke, when we were fully ramped with, at the time, I mean, we had probably 35, 40 W-2s 9 months ago. So we've had the opportunity to repurpose people and actually help them find other jobs, some of which are at Zillow now. And so Zillow was very helpful to us. They were a great partner to us throughout all of that. When I look at what happened most recently, obviously on a much bigger scale, it's what you and I have been talking about the whole time. Zillow took a big swing, right? Zillow pushed all in on something that was something that 2 or 3 companies were willing to try, and you have to have a ton of capital to do it. You have to get everything exactly right. Even when it's right, it's super narrow margins. So I'm not privy to what happens at Zillow, but I have to think, if you look at what the decision that they made is doing for them, they're going back to their core business, right? They're going to sell leads again. They know that model. They know that works. They've had the opportunity to learn some things about different parts of their business, like their mortgage business and their title business, and that may be higher margin. And so at the end of the day, for Rich Barton and the folks who are the decision makers to say, this isn't the business we want to be in. right? We've got out over our skis one way or another, and we don't want to be a part of this. We're going to go back to what we're good at and sell leads. For me, I'm all for it, right? Like, great, sell me more leads. All those people that, you were buying the houses that, we didn't get the opportunity to list. We'd love to list them, right? So we've put our hands up with Zillow already to say, I don't know where this shakes out, but I imagine you guys aren't just going to sit on your haunches and do nothing. Whatever's next, I want to be a part of.
That's thank you very much for bringing us into that. And I think it does tie so nicely into our entire conversation about Barton took a risk, a big risk. He swung, and Gary says all the time, change is inevitable, participation's optional. And with this most recent change, even what you just said there, you mentioned you put your hand up and said, I don't know what the next iteration looks like, but just as a reminder, I'm here and I'm, I want to be at the table. And I think as a business owner, it's so important to embrace change and to be willing to take that risk, even with other companies that you may partner with. I just say too, whatever your thoughts are on Zillow out there, as a leader to admit and pull back on something, that takes a ton of courage. Especially when you're answering to, shareholders and everything like that. It takes a lot of courage to admit, and steer the ship differently. And so, from that perspective alone, I do applaud that type of leadership, even though some of the other resulting things, aren't necessarily positive, right? So, moving on from that, Trent, you recently, just a couple of years ago, you were doing 100 million in volume, and you just closed the books on a $100 million month. How in the world are you out there getting enormous amounts of listings and closing these deals and continuing to provide the type of productive environment that agents want to be a part of? What else would you attribute your success to?
So the majority of what we have done well since 2018 has stemmed from EOS, and most of that is getting the people right. Without the leadership team that I have and the folks who have come and gone from that leadership team in the last couple of years, we would not have done any of this. I would still, maybe be doing $100 million a year and then going bankrupt the next year. It would just still be in that cycle. We have been able to get people who have skill sets that are very different than mine, that complement mine very well. We have done our best to get me as far out of the business as we can, because I am dangerous and I get bored and I break the whole machine. And so they are a good insulation against that. That again is just been critical to what we did. As far as how we scale from a technical standpoint, a lot of that has to do with behavioral performance. Technical performance has really come from the fact that I know MREA and other models teach we should have a 30% margin and all this stuff. At the end of the day, whatever margin I make within a year is I'm going to pay taxes on, right? So take half of it away. My belief is that if we plan accordingly and we're thoughtful, if we're making margin, we should be immediately reinvesting that back into growth, right? So why accumulate? What are we going to do with a pile of cash other than look at it and saying, good for us, here's half of it, U.S. government. So for me, I don't mind operating at a very thin margin. We spend a lot of time looking at our data, our financial statements, modeling out our projections. Again, my investment banking background and my director of finances banking background, we model out a bottoms-up analysis of how we're going to get where we're going month after month, year after year for the next few years. So we know exactly where to dial up and down. And we just had a conversation yesterday where she said, hey, I'm looking at the numbers for next year and it looks like we're, if we don't do X, Y, and Z, we might just break even. I said, but how much are we growing? She was like, well, we'll probably grow 35, 40%. I said, okay, so who cares, right? Like what, like money's nice to make, but at some point, just making money to make money doesn't make any sense. So we're doing some other things now. We're starting to build homes and do some things like that. We've expanded into new markets, Asheville and Charleston and the Triad area. We'll be probably in Ohio and Georgia and Tennessee within 12 months, if not sooner. So we're building some of that stuff out, and we're doing it by identifying people who are either on the team that want to move to those places, and we're following them and just buying leads around them to test market viability. And if it works, we'll just do exactly what I did in 2013, 14, and 15, which is add zeros to the number and build teams around them. That we just keep leaning into it, right? There's if you get to a point where you're satisfied with how much you've grown, you can sit back and ring the cash register, and that's all well and good. But I want to keep going. I don't think we're done. And so to me, it's like, if we went all in and and did what we've done here, what if we just continuously go all in? If we just keep doing this, like, where does this stop? If there's a day 15, 20 years from now that I'm at that table and somebody's handing me a $80, $100 million check, I'll be pretty happy about it. Whether or not I can actually sell a professional services business is a different story. But
that's an episode for next time we're together.
Yeah, we'll deal with that problem when we get there.
Exactly. Well, Trent Corbin, you are truly, you have the founder's mentality. And my last question for you before I transition us into the last segment of our show is, with all of what you just said, what is it that drives you? Like, why do you do all this?
So that's a great question. I've been asked that a few times, and it's always a little hard to answer because it's there's so many components of it, right? And so the big why for me is I'm very achievement driven, right? So winning is important to me. I want to build the biggest. I want to get there first. I want to do all the things. That's probably that same psychopathic component of all entrepreneurs that, like, we're trying to prove something to someone who didn't love us enough as a child. That's what,
everything goes back to that, right?
Yeah, that's in there somewhere. That's in the stew. But what I've realized kind of as we've done this and we've started, making money, is that I've told somebody, money doesn't buy happiness, money can buy peace, right? So at a certain level, you don't have the same types of stress that you do when you're trying to make ends meet. Beyond that, it becomes how you do that for other people. So for me, the coolest thing to tell people is that there are 85 people who come here every day expecting me to make sure that they can maintain their livelihood, right? The responsibility that comes with that, to support them and help them get to whatever their vision is, right? There's an iteration of me in the pool of people here that is in their version of investment banking, where they don't know what's happening next, but hopefully they'll take something away from here that leads them to a different path. And if I was doing this for myself, I'd collect some checks and I'd probably spend it, and I'd go out to nice dinners and travel more, or do something, I don't know. But knowing that you're doing it for other people, and that you can give them opportunities to do cool things, and we talk internally about outside investments, how to make their money make money. I have a whole Slack channel where that's all we talk about. That stuff's cool to me, and so that's what keeps me going, and the idea of everybody talks sometimes evil about Jeff Bezos and Amazon and all that stuff, but Jeff Bezos wants to go to the moon, whatever, I don't care. But the guy employs 1 million people, and no, maybe not everybody's paid perfectly, and nothing's ever entirely fair, but he's providing a livelihood for 1 million people. And so his company is doing something like that, and the amount of value that creates for the world is hard to imagine. And so that's the kind of thing that really is what I love about this, and what keeps me going.
Super, super cool, super powerful. The value provided for the world is what, drives that $1 trillion market cap, right? And
that's right.
And we don't always get it perfectly right. And yet, what I love and what I hear in what you're saying, Trent, is that it really is a very others-focused mission that you have. And so, hey, I could talk to you all day. I think I have you've been so generous with your time. I want to transition us quickly into the last segment of our show, which is 3, 2, 1 action. It's the same 3 questions that we ask every guest. And so question number 1, if you're ready, you ready?
Yes,
all right.
I'm ready.
Question number 1 is, what is the most influential book on your business and why?
This is going to feel like a cop-out, but it's Traction.
Not a cop-out at all. I was waiting for you to say it.
Yep. 100%. Take my MBA, throw it away, take all the tools away from me that we have. If I had to pick one book to take with me, tell me the widget, and I can apply the tools and the systems in EOS and in Traction to anything, and it will be successful.
I love it. So pick up Traction if you haven't read it. We'll link it up in the show notes. Question number 2, Trent, is who is the most influential person on your business and why?
On my business, it's odd to say. It's not that odd to say. He wasn't a businessman. My father, when I was graduating from college and going to get a job as an investment banker and figuring out what the real world would be like, I remember he said to me in a moment when I think I was getting in the car to drive down to Charlotte, he said, son, there are 2 types of people in this world. There are debt builders and there are wealth builders. Your mother and I have been debt builders. We never learned how to build wealth. And my hope for you is that you go and learn how to build wealth. And so all of this at the end of the day is me trying to build wealth.
That's incredible. Super powerful. I got goosebumps on that one. I share that. Number 3 then. This is the All In podcast where we encourage our listeners to go out and take immediate action of some kind on what they've heard today in your story. And so speaking to all real estate professionals out there, agents, investors, property managers, whatever sector in this space they're in, there is one action item that you could say, go out right now today and do this, and it's going to move the needle on your business forward, what would that action step be?
Hire someone. I don't know who it might be for you and your business, but there's a good chance you've been thinking about, if only I had someone to help me with this, I could have this much more time. I tell my team all the time, my leadership team, the thing that I don't need you to be is busy. I need you to be not busy. I need you to have delegated things to people on your team, because one of these days we're going to get a call and it's going to be another Zillow or another opportunity. And they're going to say, do you have capacity to take this on? And if we are busy, we're not going to be able to say yes. So stop being busy, get that out of here, hire the people that you need to support you, outsource it, do one-off 1099s, hire that next W-2, whatever it needs to be. And here's the thing, if it costs you money, if it's not the right hire, if you lose a little bit of money, I can almost assure you it's not as much as I've lost. We find a way back. It's amazing how creative you get when there's no money, and you have to scrap a little bit. That would be the thing. Be less busy. Go hire that person that you've been thinking about hiring, or that it might be a CPA, it might be a transaction coordinator, it could be anything, but get that stuff off your plate and open yourself up to what's coming down as a new opportunity.
Trent, so much value in today's interview. I know listeners are going to absolutely eat everything up that you said, and they're going to want to know more about how they can get connected with you. And so where's the best place for them to find you, find more of your content, anything that you put out?
Sure. So we actually just relaunched our Instagram platform at Redbud Group. You can find us on Instagram. That's probably the best way to see what we're up to. You could find me on the socials, but I'm not on them anymore. I've sort of bowed out personally. There's too much going on there. And then, of course, you can go to our website, redbudgroup.com.
Awesome. Trent, thanks so much for spending time with us today. Really appreciate you, man. Can't wait to meet you. And you're definitely someone that I just want to go grab a beer with sometime. And so, hey, have an awesome day. Thank you for impacting people and for joining us and for pouring value into our audience.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And why don't we make it 3 beers and maybe I'll see you at family reunion.
I love it. Awesome. Guys, that's another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, go play All In.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.